The speed at which our digital lives are evolving is just, it's incredible. It really has changed everything, global economies, how we talk to each other every day. But all that connection, well, it's also thrown the doors wide open to some pretty serious vulnerabilities. Cybercrime, it's not just some tech issue anymore, is it? It's become this huge global challenge. We're talking national security, economies, even, our own personal safety online. Okay, so let's really dig into this. In this deep dive, we're going to unpack this really interesting stack of sources you've shared: articles, research papers, expert takes, all looking at how international law, global agreements are trying to, well, get a handle on the borderless chaos of cybercrime and also shape how digital trade works in the future.
Yeah, and what's so interesting, I think, is how traditional crime-fighting methods just often fall short here. They're not really built for this. Cybercriminals are, frankly, brilliant at exploiting those gaps between countries, different laws, jurisdictional loopholes, which makes a truly joined-up global response not just nice to have, but, well, essential. So our job today really is to pull out the key insights, the most important nuggets from all these different viewpoints to help you understand not just what's happening, but why it's so critical.
Exactly. We'll look at just how big the spread is. We'll dive into the big international agreements trying to tackle it, how cybersecurity is changing global trade, and yeah, even zoom in on a specific case study about building resilience, where it's maybe needed most urgently. So let's start with the scale. Just how pervasive is cybercrime? I mean, we hear about the big hacks, the ransomware, but it's everything, isn't it? Cyber espionage, sure, but also just constant online fraud, identity theft. It hits individuals, businesses, governments. It's everywhere.
It really is.
Yeah.
And that pervasiveness is exactly why it just ties existing legal systems in knots. Think about a normal crime. Usually you've got a clearer picture where it happened, who was involved, which country's laws apply. With cybercrime, you could have a hacker in country A attacking infrastructure in country B, using servers routed through country C. It turns investigation into this incredibly complex web, prosecution, often nearly impossible. And just defining these crimes consistently across borders, that alone creates gaps these criminals just jump into.
And the financial cost. It's just mind-boggling. Your sources point to projections like, what, $8 trillion in damages for 2023 and heading towards $10.5 trillion by 2025? That's up from $3 trillion in 2015. It's not just growing, it's exploding.
Absolutely staggering numbers. And it's crucial to connect that to the bigger picture. Like you said, these aren't just, abstract financial losses, though they're devastating enough. We're seeing more and more attacks targeting things like power grids, hospitals, transport systems, critical infrastructure. That highlights, frankly, catastrophic potential. Ransomware hitting a hospital, that can directly endanger lives. Attacks on election systems, that shakes the foundation of democracy. It just really hammers home that one country trying to fix this alone. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
The limits of just going it alone are really stark.
Okay, so faced with that kind of threat, financial, societal, the world had to react, right? What agreements have actually come about? This is where it gets really interesting.
It is. And the global community has stepped up, though it's complex. One of the sort of foundational pieces is the Budapest Convention on Cybercrime. It came about back in 2001, effective 2004. And it was genuinely groundbreaking at the time. The first really comprehensive international agreement focused specifically on internet and computer crime. Its main goals were, well, to get countries on the same page legally, make it easier to cooperate across borders, streamline investigations, and basically give nations a blueprint for their own cybercrime laws. And here's something quite telling from the data. Analysis suggests countries that joined the Budapest Convention saw, on average, about a 30% drop in cybercrime rates compared to similar countries that didn't join, across different regions too, North America, Europe, Asia Pacific. So that 30%, it's not just a statistic. It really shows that coordinated legal action can create a deterrent. It makes it riskier for the criminals.
A 30% drop is significant. That's real impact. But if it's that effective, why hasn't every country signed up? What are the drawbacks or limitations?
Yeah, that's the rub. Despite its success, participation isn't universal. Some major players, like Russia, for example, aren't signatories, so they aren't bound by it. Plus, there's been criticism, particularly from some non-European nations, that it kind of reflects Western legal thinking, which makes it harder to get truly global buy-in. So while it laid really vital groundwork, it wasn't the complete answer. People realized a broader, maybe more inclusive approach was needed.
So what came next, beyond Budapest?
Well, the United Nations have been very active. You've got groups like the UN Group of Governmental Experts, the UNGGE, and the Open-Ended Working Group, or OEWG. Their goal is really to develop frameworks that are more inclusive, ideally leading to something universally binding. They look at the legal side, the technical side, and also, crucially, capacity building, helping all member states get up to speed. And again, data suggests nations involved in these UN processes tend to report fewer major cyber incidents and seem better equipped to recover when things do go wrong. And then you also have important regional efforts. Think about the EU's GDPR that's had huge global ripples on data protection, or the African Union's Malabo Convention, different regions tackling it in ways that fit their context.
Okay, so we have these formal treaties, UN working groups, regional rules. But given how fast tech moves and how hard international agreement can be, is that enough? Are there other ways countries are cooperating?
That's a really important point. And yes, absolutely, this is where soft law comes in. So, yeah, think of it less as binding treaties and more as agreed upon guidelines, codes of conduct, best practices, and importantly, capacity building initiatives. The Global Forum on Cyber Expertise, GSCE, is a good example. These things might not have legal teeth in the same way a treaty does, but they're vital. They're crucial for sharing knowledge, providing technical help, especially for developing nations trying to bolster their defenses. They kind of bridge the digital divide. They complement the formal agreements, sometimes paving the way for future hard law or filling gaps where agreement on binding rules is just too difficult right now. The Talon Manual, for instance, which looks at international law and cyber warfare, not legally binding, but hugely influential in shaping how experts and governments think and talk about cyber conflict.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like building norms and understanding alongside the rules. And that actually leads us nicely into the next area, because it's not just about fighting crime anymore, is it? It's shaping how countries trade digitally. International trade deals used to be all about tariffs, quotas. Now, cybersecurity is right there in the text. That feels like a major shift in economic diplomacy.
It absolutely is a huge shift. And integrating cybersecurity into trade is essential now for, well, several key reasons. First, you've got to protect the actual infrastructure of trade itself. Customs systems, international banking networks, the logistics platforms that move goods around the world, these are massive targets. A hit there could cause global disruption. Second, think about intellectual property. Digital supply chains are incredibly vulnerable to hacking, ransomware, even state-sponsored spying. Protecting these is crucial for innovation and trust in trade. And third, putting cyber rules in trade deals helps standardize security practices. It encourages countries to share information about threats. That builds the trust you need for secure digital commerce to really flourish between partners.
And we're seeing this in practice, right? Your sources mention specific examples.
Exactly. Look at the USMCA, the agreement between the U.S., Mexico, and Canada. It has specific clauses on data protection, rules for cross-border data flows, and mechanisms for sharing info on cyber threats. Or the CPTPP, the big Pacific Trade Pact. It actively encourages members to adopt common cybersecurity standards and cooperate on managing cyber risks.
So it's definitely moved from being a niche technical issue to a core strategic component of international trade.
Definitely. But getting it into these agreements isn't always easy. There are real challenges. Well, geopolitics is always there, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Nations have their own strategic interests, which can really slow down consensus on shared security standards. Then you have just plain regulatory differences. Countries have wildly different national cybersecurity laws, data privacy rules. Trying to harmonize those is a huge task. Disputes over things like data localization, where data has to be stored, really highlight that tension between security goals and wanting open, free-flowing commerce, and of course the technology gap. Developing nations often just don't have the resources or infrastructure to meet the sophisticated cybersecurity requirements that might be proposed in these deals. That digital divide is a major hurdle.
That really brings up a crucial question, doesn't it? How do all these big international agreements, these frameworks, these challenges, how do they actually play out on the ground for everyday businesses?
Yeah.
Especially the smaller ones. Let's maybe bring this down to earth with that case study you looked at Zambia's small and medium-sized enterprises, the SMEs.
Yeah, I think it's a great way to see the real-world impact. SMEs are, well, they're the engine of many economies, right? In Zambia, they're huge. They account for something like 70% of jobs and maybe 20% of the GDP, so their security matters a lot. But the problem is, this vital sector is getting hit hard by cyber attacks. The sources mentioned losses of over 150 million Zambian kwacha in just 2021 alone. That's a significant blow.
And the research uncovered some pretty concerning things about their readiness, didn't it? Like a real lack of cybersecurity training for employees, not enough basic data security measures, often no formal cyber policies at all.
Exactly. And often they're relying on just, basic antivirus software, which we know isn't enough against today's threats. Plus, a critical finding, many just don't have dedicated IT staff.
Yeah,
So cybersecurity becomes this thing that maybe no one is really owning or managing day to day.
which is risky.
Very. But here's a surprising twist from the study. It found that employees in these Zambian SMEs generally do see cybersecurity as a shared responsibility.
Wow.
It's not like they think it's only management's job.
Oh, that's interesting. So there's an awareness.
There's an awareness, yeah. But despite knowing it's everyone's job, there's a real hunger for more knowledge and training. And that's where the gap is. Businesses and the government apparently aren't providing enough official resources. So you have employees who know there's a problem, maybe even feel responsible, but they haven't been given the tools or the know-how to actually help fix it. They become the weak link, but not entirely through their own fault.
That's a key insight. And you mentioned legislation. Zambia has tried to address this with laws.
Yes, they passed a Data Protection Act back in 2021, which is a good step, setting a legal baseline. But, as the sources point out, actually enforcing that law, getting businesses compliant,
Yeah.
that remains a big ongoing challenge. Having the law is one thing, making it work on the ground is another.
Right. Legislation is just part of the puzzle.
Exactly, and this whole Zambia case study just perfectly illustrates it, I think. Effective cybersecurity isn't just about the tech or the laws. It's so heavily reliant on the human element. It comes down to awareness, proper training, and building a real culture where everyone feels vigilant and knows what to do. Without that human firewall, the best tech can still fail.
So wrapping up this deep dive, if we kind of pull back and look at the whole journey, it seems pretty clear that fighting cybercrime effectively needs this multi-layered approach. It stretches all the way from those big international treaties like Budapest, the UN efforts, the way cybersecurity is now baked into trade deals, right down to local efforts, building capacity, and fostering that individual awareness in businesses everywhere, like those SMEs in Zambia.
Absolutely, and I think the critical takeaway really is that while we are making progress with these international frameworks, the threats are evolving so incredibly fast. Cybercrime doesn't stand still. So these agreements, these approaches, they have to constantly adapt. We need more global cooperation, clearer definitions everyone agrees on, much better information sharing, and ultimately a real shared commitment across countries, across industries, public and private sectors, if we want to build a genuinely safer digital future.
Yeah. And what this whole deep dive really highlights for me is that this isn't just some abstract issue for governments or giant tech companies. It affects every single one of us. Our personal data, the stability of the economy we rely on, it's all tied up in this. So as our lives get more digital, just understanding these global moving parts is empowering. And look, if you're listening and your business operates international, trying to navigate these complex cybersecurity needs across borders, well, that's exactly what we focus on at Information Protection Solutions International. We help bridge those gaps.
Mhm. And maybe a final thought to leave everyone with. Given this constant dance between new technology and, well, us, the human factor in cybersecurity, could it be that individual digital literacy, people being proactively engaged and careful online, could that actually become the most powerful soft law of all, the thing that really shapes a resilient global digital world?
That's a great question to ponder. You can find out more about how we at IPSI help bridge nations through cybersecurity excellence at ipsi-global.com. That's ipsi-global.com. Or feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive.